Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the NYU Steinhardt Jazz Interview Series. And today we have one of the great voices on the saxophone. He's been around for about, I'd say over 20 years, right? So Chris will just be responding by whistling today. But how about a warm round of applause for the great Chris Potter? Chris, I want to start off with reading a quote and just getting what you think. Master your instrument, master the music, then forget all about it and just play. Charlie Parker. What do you think of that quote?
Good advice. I mean, if you judge by the results, Charlie Parker, yeah. Listen to what he said. Yeah, I mean, I think there is, there's a lot to that it just takes a lot of work to get the vocabulary together, to figure out what, how you want to express what it is you have in mind to express. It's just an incredible amount of work. And then when you're actually playing, if you're thinking about that at all, then you're taking away from the expressive aspect, which is the whole thing. So yeah, so you kind of have to, it's almost like you have to overlearn. You have to learn 5 times as much as you might use in that particular context, so that you'll know where to go. And if you do need to draw on some of it, then you've got it. And then it's having the taste to not use it all, to know what it is you want to do and only do that,
Well, that leads me to my second quote. I don't believe in geniuses, I believe in hard work. Michelle Petrucciani said that. Mm-hmm. So knowing you've been on my faculty for several years now too. When I see you, instead of sitting around smoking cigarettes, hanging out, you say, can I borrow a practice room? And you say, or can I get a read? I just need to get a read. You got a room I can get a read in? And 6 hours later, you're still trying to get a read, but you're nonstop practicing. So, the perception of you and many great jazz musicians is it's genius, it's a gift from God, but there's a lot of hard work involved too. And I've seen it from you.
Yeah, I mean, something that I feel like I've noticed, from meeting a fair amount of students over the years too, and also from watching some of my peers, when I first moved to New York, a whole crowd of really talented people. I would say that there's no shortage of talented people, I think people do have kind of natural levels of, where they start out that are different, I might be, it might be naturally easier for me to do a certain musical thing than someone else. It might be easier for them to do another thing that I have more trouble with. Everyone has different kind of innate levels. And I have a feeling that, if you really don't just have an ear for it, you're probably not going to get involved in it and, even get past the beginning stage of it. But then after that, yeah, I would completely agree that, there's a lot of things that have to come together, and most of it has to do with how much work you're willing to put into it,
Well, I think it's more than just work, but it's work combined with focus and know what you're practicing,
yeah,
and why, and how does it work together with other things. I will say, a few weeks ago, you called me and said, can I get into the school to practice? And I said, Chris Potter, do you need to practice? And you said, yes.
Absolutely.
And he said, it was almost like an emphatical, I only want to, but I have to practice. It seemed to me like you're saying, I don't feel right unless I practice. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, some of it is the desire to get better, and some of it is just that that's such a part of the fabric of my life. That's how I, deal with everything, and that's kind of my my way of meditating, my way of, doing something to get my energy right so that I can, give that energy out to people. So it's all kind of more of a process thing. After a certain point, it's not so much like, oh, well, I want to get to this certain level so I can execute this certain thing. It's more like that you have to keep it going. I mean, it doesn't matter how high a level you've reached. If you stop going further, it kind of goes back a level. It's just not. It's not as interesting. I mean, I think there are musicians that I have seen that you feel like, okay, yeah, they got to a very high level and then kind of, don't really work at it that much anymore. And it's still great, but the musicians that are still going, into their 70s, 80s, I mean, that's really inspiring. And you see, just like an entire lifetime of looking at things that way, and that music is a part of the process of your whole life, and your development as a musician goes along with your development as a person, and it is all connected. I mean, that's a real valuable thing, I think, that musicians who have done that can give to the rest of us. From their natural talent, but also from their, the way that they've lived their life and have now this huge reservoir of experience and knowledge of music. That's a way of sharing their experience.
So let's go back to that Charlie Parker quote. So you learn theory, you master your horn, and then you get on stage and you forget about everything. You just play. Does that resonate with you? Or I will say this, because when I watch you play, you're spinning these amazing lines, a lot of notes, a lot of thought, a lot of motion around the horn. Is that just the mastery of your horn that you worked out in the practice room, or is it a stream of consciousness once you hit the stage, or are you sitting there and thinking theory and construction?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, maybe 20 years ago, I would have a slightly different answer to that question, I think, because I felt like I was working out several kind of technical things that I felt like I needed to do to get to what I wanted to say. And, I feel like I was, still going through the process of figuring out what I wanted the vocabulary to be, At this point, I mean, I still want to add to the vocabulary. I still feel, that need. But at this point, I feel like more and more I need to forget it and really abandon any thoughts of that and just stream of consciousness. I mean, what I want is just concentration on whatever the most beautiful thing is to do at that moment. I want to be in touch and have the experience and have the, the insight to go for that at every moment.
So let's just put ourselves in your brain for a moment when you're performing on stage, and this is for musicians and non-musicians. Are you thinking about what you're going to play, or are you just reacting about what you just played? Are you sometimes I've talked to musicians, they said they can't even see the audience. They're in a state of blank. Mm-hmm. Some people call that, Stan Getz would have called that the alpha state. Mm-hmm. What's in your head at that time? Well,
if I'm thinking about how I'm going to approach things, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to do, that means something is uncomfortable. Something is not quite right with the whole circuit. Maybe I'm not feeling what is going on with the audience. The audience is very, very important, I think. I mean, whether you can see them or not, whether they're applauding loudly or quietly or not at all. I mean, you can still feel what the energy is. It always seems to be that way. I mean, sometimes a very demonstrative audience can be like kind of annoying. If you feel like they're just making noise and not actually paying attention, that can happen. And on the other hand, there can be a very quiet audience that you don't feel like you're getting that much woo back, but you can feel that they're paying attention. of course, it's great if you feel like they're paying attention and they're comfortable enough to kind of, go there with you. That's probably when it happens the best, But yeah, I mean, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next, that means I'm not quite there. And when things are really, easy, then yeah, I mean, there's that state where you feel like you're not playing, that this music is happening, and you're almost a spectator of it just as much as the audience is, that it's like this experience that everyone's having, and it, you don't even feel it's just coming through you maybe, but it's not even, it doesn't belong to you, it's just happening, and that's what I think we all want to get. I mean, it's an amazing feeling when that does happen, and it's impossible to force that to happen, but I think with more and more experience and more attention to the factors that go into that experience, you can help it. You can help it along.
I want to take you back to conversations we've had in the past. And you had mentioned, I said, when you started playing saxophone, when you got into music back in high school, you said, well, I really wasn't into the various top subjects in chemistry class. I remember you said I'd be sitting in class and thinking, well, this melody would sound this way on the tenor, and then if I transposed it to alto, it would be here. So already you're forming like a mathematical approach to music instead of how most kids in high school have more of a simplistic approach to just being in band or whatever. But you started to formalize transpositions and melodies, and I think that says a lot about you moving forward as a musician, as a thinking musician. So I found that to be very unique, that all the way back that far you had this approach that, well, what if I did this? What if I did this? If I changed that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started playing the saxophone when I was 10, and I started playing professionally when I was maybe 13. I was the only one my age interested in jazz music, and I was always playing with people that were older than me. I was always studying with people at the University of South Carolina or the local musicians, and it was a great resource. Actually, I was fortunate to run into a bunch of really great people that helped me along, showed me records to listen to and all that kind of stuff. So I was involved in it, very, very young. And by the time I was in high school, I was playing a few nights a week. So I mean, the process that still kind of happens is like probably somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm, thinking about some relationship of something with notes, it's just kind of swimming around a lot of the time, whether I even notice it.
No, but in the same respect, something that people may not know about you, you also play piano very well, and you play drums and you play guitar, and I understand you've been playing a little bit of guitar with Pat Metheny.
Yeah.
But let's talk about how did you, I know that all informs the way you play, but it also informs the way you compose, because I've seen you. You say, can I borrow a room with a drum set so I can work out the drum parts for my nonette or whatever you're doing? So how did you not only master the saxophone, but also became involved in all these other instruments that likely inform your process?
The piano was probably the first instrument that I really got involved in, just because, whenever, as a kid, I'd go to someone's house that would have a piano, I'd just be there trying to figure out how it worked and experimenting with this and that. I mean, I remember that, my folks realized that I was interested and said, well, why don't you take piano lessons? And, all of my little elementary school friends that took piano lessons, first of all, they hated playing the piano. And second of all, what they played sounded pretty boring to me. I was always like, no, I don't want to learn to read music. I don't care about that. I just want to figure this thing out. Which was limiting in some ways and very helpful in others, that I really did. I would sit there and, I remember discovering triads, like, wow, you put those three notes together, I mean, first just thirds, like, wow, okay, so that, and then if you go over here, wow, like really it was just a huge revelation, like it had never been done before, you know? I didn't realize, you know, just how, that it, yeah, I mean, obviously listening to music, it sounded like music, so I had heard it, but for me, it was a discovery, and it was so exciting, you know? That's how I approached it, and I never really took piano lessons. The problem with that being now, like, you know, it takes me forever to read a whole two-stave piano part, which I wish I could do that now. But on the other hand, at least the knowledge that I have gained of the piano is, in a fairly deep way, because a lot of it was, trial and error, and listening to records and trying to figure out what that is.
What's interesting too with the drums, there were other saxophone players in recent years that were also known as being solid drummers, like Joe Lovano, Dave Liebman, Mike Brecker.
Yeah, I mean they're all better drummers than I am, definitely.
But I think that came about from the loft scene, maybe, where they would, or Billy Drews, he told me that him and Lovano used to switch off saxophone and drums, right, and play for hours and hours. And I don't know if that actually happens these days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recall ever having that experience with another saxophone player. But I think it did used to happen a little more often, like in that exact way. With me, it's just like, oh man, I want to figure out how to do this. And I kind of started off really checking out the drums. I mean, I think I bought a set finally when I was in my early 20s or something like that. So compared to the piano, which I kind of started messing around with when I was 6, at the saxophone when I was 10, a much later addition, and not as fluid yet. I'm working on it.
Well, I think that's an eye-opening experience, because I think probably from the big band years when music became formalized and you had 5 saxophones and 4 trumpets and 4 trombones, and everybody was set, this is the instrument, the one instrument you play, or the woodwind family that you play. It changed a lot from the years before that, when people played any type of auxiliary instrument that they could pick up, mm-hmm, and that became their voice. Mm-hmm. So I think, in a sense, it's important to let others know that, your drumming, your harmony on the piano, all those things are accessed in your playing.
Oh yeah, it's there's absolutely no doubt. I mean, the things that I've discovered on the piano, I apply them directly to the horn. Sometimes practicing the piano, for a while means that when I pick up the horn, all of a sudden I can do a bunch of stuff and, hear exactly what it is I'm looking for, without even practicing saxophone. Like it's just all music, which is how I like to approach things anyway. Like, there are obviously things that are instrument specific. Getting a great sound on the saxophone is a really difficult thing to do. I think it's an easy instrument to get a mediocre sound on, and a very difficult instrument to get a really beautiful sound on. It takes a lot of experimentation, time, but music is music. The notes and the relationships and harmony, and those are, it doesn't matter from one instrument to the other. You can use it in different ways, and that's something that I always try and keep in mind, so that I don't feel kind of stuck on the saxophone. Obviously, I can execute much more on the saxophone than I can on any other instrument, but I don't want to think like from the saxophone. I want to think from what I want the music to be, and then use that to apply it to my particular instrument.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the saxophone. You're trying to find a beautiful tone and a way of expressing yourself, self-expression. In the world of musicians that know who you are, there's become a group of saxophonists that are trying to sound like Chris Potter. And in a sense, I would imagine at certain times of your life you tried to sound like Charlie Parker and Coltrane and blah, 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 and all these folks. And now you can go to YouTube and find, in fact, I think the last time we did an interview, you did a solo performance. I forget what tune it was, but people have been contacting me saying, that was We've been trying to transcribe this and play it and work it out. And so you have all these fans that are following your footsteps. What kind of advice do you have for those guys? Because you were probably in the same boat at one point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a necessary part of the learning process to copy. You know, there's no way to get around it. If there's someone that has a very developed concept, you know, it can exert a big kind of gravitational pull. I mean, it's a very strange thing for me to, you know, I didn't really know that I had a way of playing. And then I started hearing other people kind of doing, I went, oh, I guess I do, you know, that sounds a little bit like something I do, so I guess maybe there's something there. It's still very strange to have the idea that I might be in that boat. And it's a feeling of responsibility, too, that it's like, you know, you want to put out something real for people to if they're going to be checking it out. If I'm lucky enough to be in the situation to have people listening to what I do, well, you know, I want it to be what I really mean to say.
Now, we were walking on the street just the other night, and we were talking about Mike Brecker and his place in music, and you had made the comment, the reason that Brecker continued to practice so much is because there were all these people copying his style, and he wanted to make sure that he was on top of those guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, for the person who actually created it, you know, I mean, just, you know, it's another thing. It's then someone who listens to it and then does it. I mean, it's, you know, for anyone who's doing it, it's a living process, like I said, you know, and it's not finished, you know. I mean, you might listen to something that Mike played, you know, in 1980, and go, wow, that's just unbelievable, and that's it. That's him. But for him, it was how he played on that one day with the stuff he had been working on up till then. And then the next day was another day and another day and another day. You know, for him, it wasn't like etched in stone. He was just trying to get better, just like everybody else, you know, which is important to kind of keep in mind. I would imagine.
But, you know, with him, too, I heard that he was very specific and very, you know, if he never thought he played as well as he could play. You know, he was
That's why he ended up playing so well.
Right.
He wasn't easily satisfied.
But the question is, do you have those same issues?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's never enough. Yeah.
Do you have trouble listening to your solos back? And
Yeah, I mean, I find it very useful to listen back, and sometimes I go, okay, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. Remember that. Do that. Don't do what I did 20 seconds later. No, that's not it. you know, and maybe I'm the only one that can, you know. I mean, you have to have a kind of a vision of what you want to do. That's an aspect of talent that I think, you know, is difficult to kind of have a view of the forest, you know, and line up the trees accordingly. You know, that can be difficult to do. And it's easy to get lost in things that are really not important, that, oh man, you know, that one note, we had a little chirp on it, you know, it doesn't really matter. Maybe something else conceptually really does matter, and you should pay attention to that. You know, that's difficult, and it's and at the end of the day, as improvisers, you're the only one who can judge whether it is what you wanted to say or not. You know, and your view of that is going to change over time too. As you hear more music, you have more experiences playing, even just more life experience. You might hear things a different way and make different decisions. You know, I was going to say, yeah, I mean about, you know, using other people's styles. You know, yeah, I mean there's obviously, if you haven't really checked out Sonny Rollins and you're a saxophone player, you know, you should do so, first of all. And what I found, you know, is like I would be playing and I would just be trying to play like me and not really think about it. And I'd just start playing stuff that Sonny might do, but not as good because I'm not Sonny, you know. But that's a part of it. I mean, you kind of have to go through all of that. But I think it's important not to get stuck on that either, you know, to realize that is, necessary, and it hopefully fun. I mean, to discover how Charlie Parker got those sounds and what the thought process is to do it. I mean, it's an amazing thing when you go, wow, that's just, what an achievement. And just the joy of learning that is valuable in and of itself. But then, enough time goes by, maybe you're also checking out other music. I mean, not just people on your instrument, not just the style of music you're playing either. I mean, just all music, You might find yourself hearing a different thing, and you just have to go through all these processes and try not to get hung up on one particular thing for too long,
Do you ever play for a crowd and decide I have to break into my Chris Potter burning mode, or they'll be disappointed?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, there is a feeling. I mean, I don't think I can conceive of it that way. Like, but this feeling that there are certain things that maybe people are going to expect, and if I don't do that, okay, then it's not going to be enough. And the sooner I can forget about all that, the better, I think. I mean, I really hope that if some night I walked out on stage and really the only thing I really heard in my head was to play one note and then not play anymore, I would hope I have the courage to do that, Not easy. I can't imagine, literally that. But, sometimes it's like, yeah, okay, maybe it should be, I'm done after 30 seconds, and that's the end of that. So stop, But there is a pressure to, like, man, yeah, it's got to be burning.
Now, you did go out on tour with McCoy Tyner and do the Johnny Hartman Coltrane Ballads record. Did you try to hold back on that?
Well, it was clearly playing for the situation. I mean, it was not a situation to take long, extended solos. It was much more of a situation of one chorus of a ballad and say what you've got to say, which is very challenging and very rewarding. I really loved it, and I didn't, it was almost nice too, because, in that situation, obviously no one was going to expect me to play a 20-minute solo, because just nothing, there wasn't ever a time where that would happen. So it was a chance to concentrate on just doing that and really just playing the melody, which I love. I love doing that, I didn't miss it. I felt like I was really focusing on something else. Maybe from the audience, maybe people were wishing for something else, but, especially because it wasn't my band. I think that helped. It's like, well, I'm playing for this situation. So if you want a certain thing, come back and see me with my own band where I have a chance to stretch a little more.
So now has it been a year? How long have you been playing with Pat Metheny?
We did the first tour in 2012, I think. So I think we recorded before that, maybe even in 2000. Did we record in 2011? Or maybe we recorded in 2012 and then went on the road. I don't quite remember. Anyway, a couple years.
A couple years. And I know that when you go out on tour, it's likely like you do 80, 90 sets in a row.
Oh yeah, I mean, so far this year, I think we've done like 116 concerts.
Wow. Yeah. So the question is, and that's rare for most jazz musicians.
Rare for me, yeah.
Right. So what happens when you play the same music every night, and you're Chris Potter with Pat Metheny, and you really have to lay it out?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it would be. Maybe worse than it is. I actually enjoy it. It kind of gets into a zone, especially because, some of the set it's very structured. Like the orchestrion is playing, so it has to be with a click. So every time we play that song, it's the exact same length, it's the exact same tempo, It's a little like being in a play, I think. And it's when you see an actor that can really show up night after night and play the same role, there are going to be little differences every night, but they're inhabiting that role. And a great actor can do that every night, you know, and I think it's a real joy for an actor to have that, you know, if it's a good play and everything is going well, you know. So that's kind of the feeling I've had, is that, okay, with each tune, there's kind of a role that I have, and, you know, there's freedom within it. I'm improvising. But every night, maybe I realize, okay, yeah, you know, that thing I did at the end of the solo last night, you know, that was kind of cool. I wonder if there's another way to get to that, or maybe I'm sick of this. I've been doing the same thing for 10 nights on the end of this solo. Let me, you know, switch. And this is not a conscious level. It's more like when I get to it, I realize, oh yeah, I've been usually ending on a high note here. Maybe let me try it on a low note. You know, just little things. I mean, I remember reading an interview with Errol Garner about playing Misty. You know, because he played Misty at every concert he ever played. And he was talking about the same thing, that, you know, every night he tried to just do something a little different. And he still enjoyed playing Misty. And he must have played it thousands of times, you know.
Well, I'd like you to play Misty now. No, I'm just kidding. I heard from a little bird, a friend of mine, that when you're on the road with Pat Metheny, Pat is an avid practicer. He shows up, gets there before everybody at the auditorium and practices himself to death. And somebody said that Pat's been showing up and Chris Potter is there before him practicing.
Well, I stop practicing when he gets there because the saxophone's really loud. So I get there early. I get the early shift and then I leave it. That's often what it is. But yeah, I want to shed too. I want to have some time on the horn before, you know, because it's full on. I mean, you can't kind of halfway do that gig. You have to be at your best, and also it's an opportunity to, you know. I mean, when I'm on the road, is, you know, not always a lot else happening. Finally, you know, when you're home, there's a million distractions. There's so many things that have to do. It's like, okay, if I'm going to be out here, let me use the time well. You know.
This is kind of an offbeat question, but a lot of musicians aren't happy as musicians. You know, sometimes there's depression and stuff. You seem like to be one of the most positive human beings I've ever met playing music. What's your, do you like being a musician? Do you like playing? Do you like this lifestyle? And tell me what that feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very, very fortunate that I'm able to, you know, to do this and have people show up to listen. And yeah, it's great. I mean, it's I mean, thanks, I do my best, you know, but I don't think it's, you know, if you're willing to put that much time and energy into doing this, you know, that may be some signs of, you know, not complete mental health. I really, you know, there's darkness in there too. I mean, I remember, you know, at the time I first started playing the saxophone, you know, pretty lonely time was what I remember, you know. And it just, you know, it's you give certain things up because it means that much to you, or you just have this thing you need to express and you don't have any other way to express it. I mean, if I didn't play music, I think then you'd see what, you know, how sick I could be.
Okay, I hate to lead into this, but can you give us some parting words of wisdom today for all those listening?
Oh, wow. Wisdom? I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
You could have whistled that one, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll get the wisdom next time, but you know what? You're one of the bright lights in jazz music, and you're certainly an inspiration to all the students that have worked with it. You've worked with at NYU, and I'd like to thank you for coming out today. How about a warm round of applause for Chris Potter?
Thanks.
Thank you.